Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this next session here in our online payments channel. This session is one I'm really looking forward to. I think it's going to build on a lot of what we've been talking about throughout the day so far. A lot of the key themes and kind of how we can use all of these tools at our disposal to help drive conversion and build out better infrastructure so that ultimately we can do business better, take payments more effectively, and drive our businesses forward. And to do this, I'm delighted to have this panel of experts, and particularly thank you to those of you in Europe who've gotten up very early in the morning to join us. I'm looking at you, Simon, there. I know it's very early in the UK at the moment, so thank you for joining us.
No problem, Paul. It's a pleasure.
Just before I hand over to our moderator, Richard Hartung from Transcarter, who I'm sure many of you are already familiar with, a quick reminder that we will take your questions, so please just pop them into the live discussion box as we go through the session, and we'll weave them in as best we can. But other than that, Richard, it just falls to me to hand over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. We're going to be talking about increasing conversion and building out infrastructure. And as Paul said, this really builds on the previous panels, the last one on alternative payments, building into this one. And the critical question is, how do we increase conversion? Because we've had some data around very high drop-off rates when people are buying online, and it can be difficult. So there's getting everything right is critical. We're very fortunate today to have three experts with us. Simon Black is the Chief Executive Officer of PPRO. Gary Topp is the Central and Eastern Europe Regional Director at Aliexpress, and also has responsibility for global payment partnerships. And Dariusz Mazurkiewicz is the CEO of BLIK. Rather than my spending time on their introductions, because I know you want to hear from them, let me kick it off by asking each of you to give a very short introduction, starting with Gary, of yourself, your company, and the relationship between your three companies, and then what you're seeing in terms of the infrastructure being built out as we move forward. So Gary?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Richard. So hi, everyone. So I'm Gary. As Richard mentioned, I'm essentially managing the Central and Eastern European region for Aliexpress. And then since 2020, I also took over a role for payment partnerships around the world. So for Aliexpress, many people maybe know, but we're one of the international B2C e-commerce platforms of Alibaba Group. The second main one is Lazada. Lazada primarily is focused on Southeast Asia. And for Aliexpress, our main markets are in Russia, Europe, and Latin America. And our product supply is primarily from China, but in the last few years, we also started to develop supply from our key regions, for example, in Russia or in Europe as well. And then maybe to say the relationship with the other panelists, I think PPRO, they've been a partner of Aliexpress for many years now, probably since around 2015 or 2016. And they've really played a great job in helping us to localize our payment experience in many of the different markets that we serve around the world, helping us to access more customers and also providing a smoother payment experience for our customers. And then BLIK, Dariusz, is one of our key payment methods in Poland. And actually, we launched BLIK I think last June, June 2020, and we saw a real strong uplift in terms of the conversion and also somehow in terms of the maybe new user acquisition after we launched the BLIK payment channel. So we can talk more about that later.
Great. And Gary, you're looking at both Eastern Europe and Western Europe?
For me, I'm focused on Eastern Europe, let's say Central and Eastern Europe, and then we have a team that's focused on Western Europe. But I have a pretty good idea about especially from the payment side, I have quite a good idea of what's happening in all the different markets. Not just in Europe, so we can touch on that, yeah.
Sure. Dariusz, can you give us an introduction to yourself, your role, and BLIK, please?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm really happy to be here with Simon and Gary and you, just to talk a little bit on BLIK, which is the primary and first choice payment method in e-commerce in Poland, in our country, representing right now more than 70% of the whole value of local Polish e-commerce just being processed within our platform. BLIK is quite specific because it's provided by our local Polish banks, and the whole payment process is organized within a mobile banking solution. So we are not a separate wallet. We are not providing any additional tool for payments. It's just enough for a customer to have a mobile banking application, and then the payments are fully embedded in the whole, let's say, banking user experience. So we cooperate with a lot of partners. We are local payment system and payment scheme. And one of our key partners right now are cross-border and global, let's say, marketplaces. Gary is a great example for us just to be present and have a very prominent position as a payment method. And Simon with PPRO is our absolutely important partner, and probably I would say the first one for us, just allowing us to provide our payment user experience for outside Poland. So maybe just this, first introduction would be enough just to start with BLIK.
Fantastic. And then Simon, you've got a fairly global role in here. So maybe you can give us some introduction to your firm and the markets you're covering and some of the potentially differences you see. Obviously, we're focusing to a degree on Poland and Eastern Europe, but we also want to relate it into what's happening in Asia. So over to you, Simon.
Yeah, likewise, very happy to be here on the panel and get this opportunity to cover these topics. So thanks to you and Paul and the Seamless team. I think, what the guys have just explained so far is actually a global trend. So Dariusz talked about, the rapid rise and success of BLIK, and almost surprisingly, a huge amount of that e-commerce volume is on cross-border e-commerce. And Aliexpress benefiting from that, and actually the biggest winners are the consumer, because it makes life easier for the consumer, gives them more choice, and then of course that's good for merchants. But what's happening with BLIK in Poland, we could point to markets right around the world where there's this similar trend of new local payment methods gaining traction rapidly, and creating more cross-border opportunities. But integrating a payment method is quite a lot of effort and work, especially in a cross-border situation. So PPRO has built an infrastructure layer to do those integrations market by market in most countries around the world. And then we enable a single point of access to our partners, including the team at AliExpress, Alipay, and the Ant Group, as well as many other payment service providers who enable their merchants around the world. So we're really simplifying, enabling that single point of integration and managing a lot of the complexity so our partners can focus on growing their business.
Fantastic. And localization of payments, as we're hearing here and as we've heard in some of the previous panels, is really important for businesses that are looking to expand their footprint, increase their sales. And Gary, can you start us off by looking at some of the insights on, across markets, why AliExpress localizes, what you've seen in the different markets, and then also talk a little bit about sort of factors you see as increasing conversion that are especially important, if you have some examples on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think AliExpress, we're kind of, let's say, quintessential global marketplace. So every day on AliExpress, there's probably a consumer from pretty much every country, maybe 190 or 200 countries in the world actually making a purchase. So that's one of the most powerful things about the marketplace and our business. But what we'll find as we go deeper into each market is that every market has its own kind of characteristics. And if we really want to succeed in the market, then we need to localize, right? And a lot of this localization comes in different areas. So some of it, for example, is in like the products. So, people in different markets, they want different price range. Maybe they buy different categories, like different style of products. So we need to localize this. Some of it is in the interface, like what colors you use or what language you use also needs to vary. But a lot of it is in the actual infrastructure in terms of the experience. So for example, logistics, and then also payment. So we see that, consumers in different markets, they have very different requirements in terms of what kind of payment experience they require, and even what kind of payment products they require. So probably in the last, 5 years, I would say, we've really been working very strongly on this to localize as much as possible. And I think we now have around, I was calculating before the session, around 40 different payment methods on AliExpress right now. So it's quite an impressive number, and it's probably one of the biggest, I would say, or one of the largest for e-commerce platforms. So I think it's something to be proud of. But what we also see is that the pace of change is faster and faster. There's more new like startups or new payment providers kind of coming into the market, for example, BLIK. And we also need to be very quick to kind of adapt to our consumer requirements and adapt to these changes. So I think that's where, for example, someone like PPRO can be very essential partner for us, because they kind of have the network already and they can reduce a lot of the kind of technical or integration work on our side, so that we can be more nimble to kind of react to the updates and changes in the market. Yeah. So that's a brief summary. Yeah.
Well, let me pick up on one thing, because it was very interesting when you said there's different payment experience in different markets. And people have these different preferences, and I know websites look different in different countries, payment experience. Could you give us maybe one or two examples of that?
Yeah, I can give you some great examples. I mean, for example, I think some really interesting markets, the Netherlands. So maybe in the Netherlands, maybe 70 or 80%, higher than 80% of our volume is actually by bank transfer. We right now have the partner Ideal. Actually, it's also working through PPRO. So it's completely different from other Western European countries where actually card payment is more dominant. And if we didn't have Ideal, if we didn't have the bank transfer, then actually our user base, our volume in the Netherlands will be much, much lower than it is today. So that's a good example. The second one is a country like Brazil, for example. So for Brazilian consumers, they really like maybe two things. One is, for example, boleto. So it's kind of a cash cash payment, let's say. The second thing is installment, kind of because of the macroeconomic environment in Brazil. Like Brazilian people, they're very willing to use installment, and they're also used to having actually interest-free installment on their payments. So these two things we also worked very hard to provide, and we see each time when we kind of integrate a new service, we really see our business can move to kind of another level, I would say. So yeah, we're always trying to localize as much as possible, and also keep up with the change and keep up with the trends. So I think it's quite exciting from the merchant or from the marketplace perspective to see what's happening. Yeah,
exciting and challenging for you. Well, let's narrow in and look at Poland specifically, and then we'll go back out and Simon, ask you for the broader perspective as well. But Dariusz, can you give us some insights into what the various local payment methods you're working with, and then some of the ways that you've helped especially merchants or others increase the conversion rate and make sure there's not that drop off that we often hear about?
Okay, so I would say that first of all, we should mention that operating as a payment method provider and payment system platform in Europe, we are exposed to very specific regulatory aspects, including what we call strong customer authentication, which provided a lot of complexity for different payment methods. It really required really stronger control on payments for customers from our local regulators. We were really lucky to have in BLIK very, I would say, deeply embedded in the DNA of the whole authorization process, the SCA, the strong customer authentication, the confirmation of the details of the transactions executed within a mobile banking solution was really perfect for us to provide the SCA, actually, according to the regulations. And we brought this experience to the checkout processes in e-commerce, and we discovered that this is probably one of the greatest things that we could provide with our mobile banking solution. Actually, we could really support the strong customer authentication in e-commerce. We really profited a lot as a payment method from this regulation, I would say, during the last few years. Right now, we know that the conversion is really critical, not only for merchants like Gary, but it's also critical for, I would say, payment instrument users. So in our situation, this is mobile banking users. So that to provide the unique and really, I would say, coherent user experience with fully embedded checkout with BLIK, and then zero problem, let's say, seamless experience for a customer. And just to tell you, the process of BLIK is like for a customer who knows how to use it, is just 4 or it's a 5-second process just to execute the payment. But in order to execute the payment in this, let's say, fast and convenient way, we really need to have a great infrastructure behind. And the infrastructure challenges are really immense, are really big for us as far as we are talking about really cross-border and global platforms. So this is really a big challenge. We really managed our local infrastructure, but once we are leaving Poland, it's really another story.
Yeah. So as you've gone about this, sometimes the authentication can create barriers because it seems a little bit harder for people. So have you been able to simplify it down quite a bit so it's an easy customer experience?
Yes, exactly. And I would say we have simplified it to this level that today almost half of all financial transactions executed in Polish mobile banking apps. So I'm talking right now about top 10 Polish mobile banking apps. Half of them are BLIK payments. So in Poland, actually it's 44% at the end of 2020. So in Poland, mobile banking is not only for financial products, for money transfers, I don't know, investments, whatever you have in mobile banking. In Poland, mobile banking is for payments. And we have BLIK inside. And just to tell you, the strong customer authentication required for other financial processes as well, of course, especially in BLIK payments case, are bringing such a great experience that today BLIK brand in Poland is a loved brand. It's to BLIK it means to pay in e-commerce in Poland. This is almost the equivalent in wording. So this is an extreme success that we have. But just I would like to tell you, Richard, that having this kind of success on our local market is also a big challenge for us. It means that we really need to, to provide next steps of our development. We really need to plan our strategic steps for next year and next years, and so we are really targeting to become more and more regional payment method. More regional payment method, the local national payment method. And it is especially in this aspect of our development, we do need global infrastructures. We do need to bring acceptance to our customers. And in order to attract banks from other countries than from Poland, we really need to be present on AliExpress. We really need to have PPRO on board, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to provide really interesting and exciting acceptance for our customers.
Fantastic. And so Simon, what I'm hearing is everything depends on the infrastructure. And so no pressure on you, of course. You've just got to make it all work seamlessly. So two things, what do you do to make it work seamlessly and make that technology behind it work? And then what are you seeing in other markets also on the localization of payments and ways that, sort of the success stories on conversion, similar to what I asked Gary earlier?
Yeah, so I think in terms of what are we doing to make the infrastructure work, I think there's three things that stand out about PPRO. I think first is focus on performance in terms of our platform. So that's about the performance of the technology, but also about the performance of the payment processing itself. I think we'll talk a little bit later about payment conversion rate. So it's not enough just to process a transaction. You want to maximize as much as possible the success rate for the consumer. One of the things Dariusz talked about was a frictionless experience. I think we've all had that experience where we're trying to get through a checkout, enter a number or a password, and it doesn't work, it hangs or whatever. So this is really key, both for the consumer but also the merchant. Because ultimately, as Gary said, we're trying to drive revenue growth here. I think the second thing we do in terms of delivering on the infrastructure is really providing our expertise. And because of our focus on enabling local payment methods, we can engage directly, for example, with the team at BLIK, build a relationship, really understand not only the scheme as it works today, but where they're heading, refine the processing, improve the conversion rate. And we have probably more expertise, I think, within our business on local payments than even super large payment companies because of that focus. We have teams around the world with particular focus on LATAM, Europe, and Asia Pacific regions. and we'll be building out into Middle East and Africa as well. I think the third piece is our approach to partnering. It's really in our DNA. This needs to be a collaborative enterprise. So we're more like a professional services firm in some ways. We want to consult, collaborate, listen, continuously improve. And we built and developed our team and our culture on that basis. As Gary says, we've been partnering with AliExpress and Ant Group since 2015. And that's really the approach we take. We want to build long-term partnerships, continually improve. And I think what we talked about there is, it's like a lot of pressure to build out this infrastructure. I mean, that's our vision. We want to make the world connected. We want to improve access for all consumers around the world. And if you do that, you create amazing opportunities for merchants. And it's great to support hugely successful merchants like AliExpress. But I think what drives economic development also, particularly in emerging markets, is SMEs. And I think when we can enable small businesses to grow by getting access to a market overseas much more easily than they would have thought possible, that's a great thing for economies and therefore society. I think the second part of your question was just to zoom out a little bit. Really, it's a global phenomenon, as I said. It's not an overstatement to say that we're going through a global payments revolution. I mean, we've seen, particularly since the start of the pandemic, a revolution in the e-commerce, massive growth in demand. And what we'll see over the next couple of years, I hope very soon we're coming out of the pandemic, and then that we'll look back on that as a turning point for the end of cash as we knew it, but also turning point for real emergence of a digital economy for goods and services, not thinking purely of your traditional e-commerce, right, of buying, products or travel, but we will be paying digitally and having, digital relationship with providers in all walks of life. We're starting to see that now. So the growth potential is huge. And I think particularly in this context, we'll see more and more of what I call, border-free commerce. The consumer increasingly doesn't care where their stuff's coming from. They just want to work with a company, often through an interface on their phone, where they feel I can trust this company, it's reliable. I want to click, check out, as Dariusz says, in 4 or 5 seconds, and consume my service or wait for my goods to arrive. So it's a super exciting time to be in the space. And as I said, we see similar stories in Japan, with PayPay. We've seen GrabPay emerge. You see similar regional differences. We talked about the difference between Netherlands and other Western European markets. The way people pay in Malaysia, predominantly through online bank payments, is very different to, say, Indonesia, where wallets are fast growing. And that you could repeat that story right around the world.
Fantastic. Your comment sort of segues into my next question very well, which is on the purchases from other places. You said the consumer really doesn't care. One of the things is I found as I was preparing for this panel, which surprised me, is the top cross-border shopping destination for people in Poland is China. So somehow you've all put together an easy experience for Polish consumers shopping at merchants in China. So I want to see how you put that together. And then, since our audience is mostly from Asia and would also love to sell to Poland or other markets, sort of what are the lessons learned if someone is in Thailand and wants to export, or Hong Kong or other places and wants to export, that they can say, oh, here's the experience from Poland that we can apply back in our market to make it easier for our merchants as well. So maybe Gary, your company is working in a variety of places. Maybe if you can kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So I think, I think for, let's say Poland specifically, because it's also more my expertise, let's say. I think what's really exciting about this market is, I think, a few things. I think the first thing is the actual, there's actually a very strong underlying economic growth in the market. So if you look probably from, actually I saw a figure really interesting in the last few weeks. From 1991 till 2021, actually the fastest growing market in terms of GDP per capita, or the biggest change in terms of GDP per capita, is China. And actually the country in second place is actually Poland. So the change is around 10 times during that time. So you see this fantastic kind of economic growth in the market, and secondly, also the e-commerce growth at the same time. So you see the e-commerce penetration kind of catching up more and more with Western European markets like the UK, for example, or Germany. So I think this is the first thing. I think from our perspective, you know, we also really saw like a nice opportunity from the competitive, from the competitive perspective, and then also from the product market. You know, you kind of mentioned that, you know, people in Poland, they most like to buy the products from China if it's outside. You know, I think it really speaks to kind of a lot of the value that we have as a platform, which is providing a very wide abundance of products, which may not be available in the local market. And the second thing is providing a really strong offer in terms of like the price quality. So providing very good quality products at a very competitive price, let's say. So I think this has really helped us to break into the market and do quite well. And then I think how to, you know, for merchants, you know, like Simon mentioned, for example, SMEs are, you know, around the world, how they want to export or how they want to access other markets. I mean, I think that's exactly why Aliexpress, you know, we want to exist, right? For us, our objective is also to be an infrastructure in some way. Like we want to also build a platform which makes it very easy for, you know, an SME in Europe, in China, in Russia, wherever, to kind of quickly open a store. Have all the payment methods they need in different markets, have a logistics infrastructure that they can quickly access, and they can just worry about, okay, you know, reaching my consumer, what kind of price, like what kind of product do I need to sell, rather than thinking too much about these more basic kind of user experience, like infrastructure aspects. So I think it's kind of what we're also focused on, and I definitely think cross-border e-commerce will be the critical kind of driving force of this increase in trade, because I think it ever more breaks down the barrier between the producer of the good or the brand owner and the consumer in another market. You know, but maybe when we had kind of more traditional B2B, let's say, you know, there's kind of many layers inside, and it also takes a lot of time for the products to actually kind of move from the original owner to the consumer. But now we have like especially B2C cross-border e-commerce, like the consumer can connect directly to the brand or to the you know, the product producer. So I think it's an exceptionally powerful trend. And as Simon mentioned, I would say it's only getting stronger. To be honest, yeah.
Yeah. And Dariusz, how has it worked on your side of helping the Polish consumers go shopping in China, but all in other countries as well?
Yeah, I would like to tell you that during the last 6 years of development of BLIK in our country, of course, starting from scratch, from zero level in 2015, because it was a very fast growth during the last years of BLIK, what we saw in Poland. Right now, we see that our let's say long-term merchants offering BLIK within their platforms, their shops, websites in Poland, and so on, are becoming more and more cross-border as well. So this is, on one side, this is of course a big popularity of Aliexpress in Poland, of let's say doing shopping outside Poland for Polish customers. But on the other side, the Polish merchants really starting to do business outside Poland. So this is two-way traffic, I would say, that we observe. It means that e-commerce is becoming no longer a story about local, national, country, let's say, habits and let's say and commerce local. It's really becoming cross-border. So I would say that behind this there is a big concept of I would call it platformization, probably, of e-commerce. Or globalization of e-commerce. SMEs are really, they have no other way and to sell outside Poland, outside the country, in Europe, in Asia, in North America, South America, if they want to exist. The competition is becoming stronger and stronger. So I would say the commerce or e-commerce is already global. And the second thing I would like to tell you is that it's absolutely true that in Poland, during the last year, we just made a big step forward in the e-commerce, let's say, penetration in the whole Polish consumption, I would say. So there was still something to catch up. We had like more or less 10% of the whole consumption in Poland going through e-commerce. Right now, it even accelerated. And what we did in Poland during the pandemic times, we treated, I think that in general in our country, we treated e-commerce as a kind of, and logistics for e-commerce and payments as well, as a kind of critical infrastructure, I would call it. So it was absolutely important for our Polish economy to keep e-commerce alive. And what it meant to keep e-commerce alive, it meant to provide to our regulators that we are still on, whether even if we are on home office and banks are on home office, the whole economy is really, you know, like globally is confronted to these terrible times of COVID, e-commerce must work. And it really worked very well in our country. So I mean that we have big population really switching to e-commerce. We had a lot of Polish citizens starting to to shop online for the first time probably in their life ever. The average age of a Polish guy going to e-commerce for shopping really went, very up, I would say. So in general, I would say that we made a tremendous step forward, and luckily we had BLIK in Poland, because it's absolutely much easier to provide a great education for newcomers to e-commerce when there is a secure and very easy payment method that could be favorable to new e-commerce habits, I would say, in Poland. Yeah.
Yeah. And Simon, your perspective on linking all this together on the technology side?
In terms of the growth, yeah, you can't stand still. I think Dariusz made that point earlier, Gary too, that it's a dynamic market. I think what's fascinating actually is that I agree, e-commerce clearly is the global phenomenon, and we need platforms to support that. But what drives localized payment choice is really down to different cultural factors, different economic environments, different historical factors. So for example, why the majority of Dutch like to pay with Ideal directly from their bank? Because there's a cultural aversion to credit. Similarly in Germany, today, most adults still don't own a credit card. Renting a home is much more prevalent in Germany than other countries versus buying a home, because people don't want credit. In the UK, I think in the US as well, we think, oh, well, we own our own home. It's like, well, no, you don't. Actually, your mortgage provider really owns the home, right? You're in huge debt, but you think, no, I own my home. Culturally, it's a massive difference just in Germany, right? So I think the cultural differences will continue. So we will have, if anything, there'll be more fragmentation of payment methods, right? We see like PIX in Brazil coming from nowhere, new wallets emerging, in different markets. And so the complexity for those wanting to sell cross-border when it comes to payments will increase. So for PPRO, we have a massive task ahead of us to stay on top of that growing complexity, that fragmentation of payment methods worldwide, and not only aggregate those into our offering for our partners, but also ensure, as I said earlier, we're constantly improving the service, improving the effectiveness, the conversion rate. And part of our future will be adding more value-added services around the payment processing itself. So looking at areas such as fraud or accelerated funding. And I think also we will look, as the digital economy grows, our focus today is on helping people, typically merchants, collect funds, but we will start to look at also how we can enable paying out to consumers as well.
Great. Let me sort of carry on from that, Simon, if I may. Now, one of the things is getting the information to the merchants. And so you've got Polish and Chinese and different things that people are going to want, as you mentioned, the value add type services that you're trying to provide. So what have you done about, if you're involved in it, with providing information to the merchants, making sure information and the insights that they need get back to them on that side, and then for the banks in Poland as well, or for BLIK?
Yeah, it's a critical part of the process. I think often we think of payments as what's going on when the consumer's checking out, and that's the beginning of the process. And ultimately, you know, you want money to go from a consumer's account to the merchant's account. So the bits in between are enabling settlement of funds, reconciliation, collecting the, sending out the funds, providing, to your question, the data, that the reporting. And then trying to enrich the data for the merchant. These are all, you know, critical steps. So it's a very multifaceted process, which we're enabling. And we look to provide as much data as the scheme enables. And then on top of that, and going forward, we're building a BI. We built a BI capability for our partners, business intelligence, which they can access, and increasingly they will be able to benefit from our aggregated volume that we see across all our customers. Going beyond that, we'll look to deliver predictive insights, and that will require a deployment of machine learning to build up artificial intelligence. And that's something that will be a focus of ours over the next 3 to 5 years.
Data scientists' numbers must be growing in your company.
Yeah, we're looking. Yeah, any data scientists watching, please reach out.
Great. Yeah, AI and machine learning are critical. Gary, your thought on the merchant side? If you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think what Simon said actually. You know, makes a lot of sense. You know, I think there's really, from a merchant perspective, there's really a lot of complexity to consider, like when you're localizing the payment. I mean, providing the correct payment method, optimizing the conversion for the consumer, you know, it's one part. You know, there's also things, for example, like the foreign exchange. You know, because we want our users to pay in their local currency, but then we also need to settle to our merchants in a different currency, you know, overseas. So how you collect the funds, how you do the foreign exchange, how you do the settlement to the merchant is all very important. But at the same time, there's also the cost, right? Because we also want to manage the kind of cost of the payment. We don't want it to take too big a share of, you know, the commission or whatever, because we also want to try and minimize that for our consumers and our merchants, right? So I think this is also something. And then there's also, as Dariusz mentioned earlier, you know, different markets also have different regulation. So there's different regulatory frameworks that we need to always consider. Different behavior in terms of like fraud, for example, it can also be kind of a big problem. So we also have a big team always working on kind of the fraud management, like risk control. So there's really a lot to kind of consider. Yeah. So I think it's, for us, it's kind of as the marketplace, like we really rely a lot on our partners where much of the expertise in these kind of areas is actually kind of located, right? For example, in BLIK, in Poland, or in PPRO, who provide a kind of network for us globally. So I think there's so much to consider, but I think, yeah, like Simon mentioned, I think we see so much improvement in terms of the market, and we also see actually that kind of being demonstrated in terms of the success rates or conversion rates, and also in terms of payment costs. Like we're all seeing kind of improvements over the last 2 or 3 years, I would say. So this is where a lot of the innovation is providing value.
Yeah, and I think that the costs and expenses are critical. I know here in Singapore, there's one financial institution that, you know, won a global contract because they could bring down the FX markup for a global merchant by 25 basis points or something like that. It's making so much of a difference when you're looking at it on a global basis. So yeah, absolutely right. Dariusz, let me go over to you, and if we can sort of flip it around and say, you mentioned that there's a lot of sales to merchants, to customers overseas, and the Polish merchants are trying to do that. Are you involved in that side of it as well? And what are you seeing with the Polish merchants and informations and insights for them?
Yeah, definitely. I would probably pay attention to 2 things, which in my opinion are really important, really critical in this area. So FX management, really critical for a scheme and payment system like ours in the global, let's say, expansion of acceptance for our participating banks. We wouldn't be able just to manage this complexity without, let's say, without this expertise provided by PPRO, And we think that this is absolutely critical. We are just operating in our local Polish zloty, and we really need to manage, and it's critical. But another thing is that probably we should also take a look a little bit on the marketing perspective, I would say. AliExpress is a great partner of ours in Poland in terms of the communication to customers. So the Singles Day is really one of the most important e-commerce events in Poland, I would say, in November. And we Polish guys are really looking forward to that day for the promotions and so on. We really want to be a partner, and we think we are. I don't know if Gary confirms, but we want to be a partner in communication and bringing even more, let's say, value to Ali with our let's say, our banks, I would say, communication power that we have in Poland. And we are really getting ready. Every time we are getting ready with Simon, with PPRO and Gary for this particular day, because this is really specific. This is something. And this is every year, this is another test of, I would say, of scalability, another test of infrastructure, and we always managed, but we are still getting ready for next year. So this is absolutely great, I would say, great situation for us, because this is, on one side, this is challenging, on the other side, it's bringing this, I would say, sexy part of payments for customers, you know, real promotions, real communication, and so this is absolutely great what we are doing all together.
Fantastic. It's interesting how it's evolved with Singles Day, because when I worked for MasterCard, a lot of it was looking at, you know, you have to prepare for peak day on either Black Friday or a day or two before Christmas. And now it's sort of like, okay, you got to prepare for Singles Day. So as your peak volume. So just fascinating how that has transitioned over. Let me look a little bit at how you've worked together and success factors, because I think people in other markets, whether they're in, you know, Europe or Asia or other places, are looking at it. How do we partner together and collaborate? So, you know, rather than, you know, pushing, we want to work together to make sure everything succeeds well. So for each of you, starting with Dariusz, if I may, what are one or two of the key success factors you've seen in working together with your other two partners who are here?
So first of all, I would say that we are very lucky to have PPRO as partner, because, to be honest, integration and discussion and, you know, all the things on, you know, the technical aspects that were discussed with PPRO is on APIs and so on. I would say that probably no difference between any local player right now. We didn't have a feeling that this is a big platform, you know, operating far away, just like they were based in Warsaw. So the discussion was quite easy, really easy. I absolutely admit what Simon said, that they know very well every scheme. They really know BLIK. So they are very close to our team. So this is one critical thing. Another thing I think is extremely important, probably it's specific to the Polish, let's say, e-commerce payment culture. But what is important is just to have this confidence and trust in relationships between all parties. I mean that if we discuss with Gary on promotion, on different communication and so on, there's a full cooperation with PPRO. There is trust, because, you know, you may say that this traditional business model is that payment services provider the provider of infrastructure is keeping the merchant, and you stay in your position. Your role is just to be, you know, to be a good payment instrument, and this is your role. We keep the whole relationship with the merchant. We didn't have this situation. The trust between us is really important. So, you know, this great communication on daily basis, this is critical, I would say. So, yeah, maybe these two aspects, Richard. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Gary, what are some of the key success factors that you've seen in working with your partners here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for Dariusz and Simon in particular, for BLIK and PPRO, I think a lot of it is to do with the mindset. I mean, I think Dariusz and Simon actually they already touched on it. For PPRO, I think, we've always had this kind of growth mindset from both sides. Like Simon mentioned, we started working together in 2015. At that time, actually, AliExpress is also not the biggest platform, to be honest. We're only starting to become known in certain markets. But PPRO also put the trust in us, and they also really invest a lot to kind of make sure that we can grow our business and enable our customers as well. So I think that's been really valuable. And I think at the same time from BLIK, like Dariusz mentioned, it's not just, okay, we want to provide the best payment experience, which we do, but we also working with BLIK to kind of co-promote the services, to educate more users about AliExpress, to educate more users about BLIK. And I think that's been very powerful in terms of kind of bringing more users actually to the platform. So this is something that we also take as one of the key choices, or one of the key decision-making factors when we're choosing a new payment method, because we like to see that actually it's not just, okay, we want to provide the baseline experience. We also want to work together to grow the business, right? Because I think this is beneficial for both sides. So we work a lot on the marketing and promotion side, as Dariusz mentioned. And for example, Singles Day, we will even, maybe 1 year before, in December or January, then, 1 year before, we'll already start talking about, okay, this year, Singles Day, like what kind of promotion can we do? Like what kind of interesting offer, or what kind of interesting content can we give for our joint customers? So I think this is a really powerful mindset when you have 2 or 3 companies who are working together, like from this growth perspective. Yeah, so I think that's the key, I would say.
Fantastic. And Simon, let me build on it a little bit to ask about sort of key things you've learned in working with your partners here. But then if you can broaden it out a little bit to Asia and say if there are certain things you've looked at that either you do exactly the same thing in Asia as you've done in Poland, or there are differences that you've seen along the way, if you can do that at all, and expand it out for our Asian audience as well. So working with your partners who are here, and then sort of the lessons learned that people could use in parts of Asia, which I know is a key market for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, this is a great discussion, and Gary and Dariusz, the positive feedback. I think the themes there of trust, growth mindset, are absolutely essential. I think one other which really underpins our delivery is a focus on quality, and I think that's also been a very critical success factor, and will become more important. And I think that's something at PPRO, we don't want to be the cheapest, let's call it, right, in terms of the cheapest approach, taking shortcuts, dismissing regulators. We want to do things in absolutely the correct way, because I think that serves our partners best in the long term. And quality can cover anything from our investment in compliance, which is significant and growing, right through to, which we talked about earlier, payment conversion. Speed, focus on. I think in terms of, and if you look at this case we presented, success story about matching relations and a terrific local payment scheme with a merchant with global ambitions, and we keep saying merchant, I mean, AliExpress, I think it's more than that, but this commerce platform, and in the same principles apply. You have to look at not Asia, not even South Asia, Indonesia, Japan, or it's China, it's Hong Kong. And what's the culture framework, and then navigate within the opportunities. And we're seeing more and more success stories exactly with this approach, where we'll work with a payments partner, with a merchant, and help identify where are the opportunities, what's right for their consumer, and solve the issues that come up.
Great, thank you. Simon, you're breaking up just a little bit, just so you know, but thank you. So you've all mentioned that there's a lot that's changing, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning that's coming in, there are new payment methods coming in. Buy now, pay later has just exploded in some markets over the past couple of years. That's coming in. A lot of different ways of a lot is changing on the technology side, on the merchant side, on the consumer side. What are you looking at going forward in terms of things that you prepare for? If you're looking at 2 or 3 years from now, what do you need to do today that are success factors for being ready 1 or 2 or 3 years from now, or enabling your customers to increase conversion rates, spend more easily? Gary, maybe we start with you, and then Dariusz, and then over to Simon for the perspectives.
Okay, it's a big question.
Yes,
so I think, I mean, what are we preparing for? So I think some of the, from our perspective, some of the things that we've been investing a lot on that maybe we didn't touch on today, especially from the supply chain logistics side, because I think this is becoming ever more important. In terms of what kind of experience we provide to our users from a logistics perspective. When they, what kind of delivery method, like when they receive their products, how they can return their products, where the product's located. So we've been investing really a lot in this, and I think it's going to be one of the critical determining factors, I would say, in the next 2 or 3 years. Something else we've been investing a lot on is where we see some trend is in like this connection between e-commerce and social media, for example. So I think this will also be one of the growing trends, I would say, in the next 2 or 3 years. I think in China, where I'm based right now, this is already kind of a very popular thing, actually, kind of linking like whether it's live stream or content in the conversion or in the purchasing process. And I think it's also becoming more and more popular, let's say in Europe or the United States. And I think this will also continue. Yeah, and then the other thing I think is always in terms of the user experience and also in terms of the supply that we offer, trying not to stay kind of stale in terms of the supply, because I think for AliExpress we rely a lot on the China side in terms of the manufacturing base, but we also see maybe manufacturing a lot of times is our supply chain kind of moving to different countries. So how we can actually keep on top of this, like we can also enable merchants in different countries where they might have kind of products that buyers want to use. We also trying to match this movement as well. So I think there's quite a lot to think about, maybe not just from the, obviously the payment side is also one of the most dynamic sides, but from other aspects, there's also a lot to think about, yeah.
Great, thank you. Dariusz, what are you preparing for?
Yeah, so it's a great question to ask for, payment expert, what we are preparing for the next few years. The world is so dynamic. Probably I would pay attention to 2 things. One thing is that we need, as BLIK, we need to expand. So what we are preparing right now, as I mentioned before, we would really love to become, and what this is what we are getting ready for. We want to be more regional and start to be more regional payment method. A lot of challenges, but this is what we are getting ready for. And another thing, probably extremely important for payment systems right now, is what we call instant. So this is a big challenge for the future. Instant payments, we are dealing with this in this I would say P2P aspect, but once it goes to payments, it's a lot of new challenges. And the infrastructure being built right now here in Europe, at least, is providing new exciting opportunities, but also new challenges for payment systems. We want to be really in the process. We really want to be in the core of this. So I would say instant trend in payments. So this is really the future for payments. And probably the third thing, definitely mobile driving e-commerce. This will be this is what we see in our operations, in our business. In our case, this is mobile banking. So really, profiting from mobile banking and providing value for mobile banking with payments. We really believe in the synergy between mobile banking operation and payments on a daily basis. And this is this kind of education that we would like to bring to new customers outside Poland. And we think that there is still great space to grow in Europe for us, and this is what we will do. And hopefully we have such great partners like Ali for acceptance and PPRO for infrastructure. It will be absolutely important for us to have them on board all the time.
Great. And Simon, if you can look again at the European side and perhaps Asia if you can as well, in terms of what you're looking at for the next couple of years. preparing for?
Yeah, I think particularly in Asia, I mean, we see massive expansion for PPRO. We want to enable more and more markets for our partners, providing comprehensive coverage. We'll invest a lot in our banking and payments network in the region to enable faster settlement. I agree with Darius, the world's speeding up from a payments perspective, and we want to be ahead of that. And we'll be looking at more and more additional services. Gary mentioned earlier, FX, is a big challenge. So how can we support our partners to just solve more and more problems and aspects of the complexity? And finally, as I said earlier, is to really take advantage of our global perspective by providing more and more data insights to help our partners make better management decisions.
Good. Well, let me just build on your earlier mention of AI and machine learning. What are you doing with that, or what are you looking at in terms of the personalization that'll deliver? I'm not sure in the first instance is personalization. What we really want to help is, I think if you think of what Gary said earlier, right, it's helping manage, a global marketplace dealing with 40 different payment methods, and I'm guessing, in 3 years from now it'll be a lot more than that. So we want to be that expert. We're an extension of our partners' teams to help them identify, what's going on, how to optimize a transaction, optimize a conversion, or which payment methods might fit better with their target market. I think with our scheme partners like BLIK, we want to provide better insights for them, again, of what we're seeing, so that they can help adapt. And, it's very easy in panels like this. We talk about our objectives, right? Darius will say, yeah, faster payments, and I'll say, oh, more, AI. But reality is, internally, it's a battle for resource. How do you prioritize what to invest? So I think we can help our scheme partners like BLIK determine the prioritization over new features they might want to adapt. Or what can they learn from what's going on with different kind of payment methods in different markets. So we want to, that's I think the first step. I think maybe enabling some kind of personalization is further down the road. Fantastic. We've got about 2 minutes left. So let me just ask before we leave, your 30-second takeaway that you'd like people to remember from the session. What is your real sort of key takeaway? So Simon, let me check with you, then Darius and Gary, round us up.
Yeah, payment choice drives revenue. So, find the right partners to work with to give you consumers a better choice of payment methods.
Love the tagline. Thank you. And Darius?
I would say that global expansion in payments, especially, is a story about partnership.
Great. And Gary?
Yeah, I would say similar. I think absolutely from a merchant perspective, the localization is absolutely critical, and you need the right partners to be able to do that, I would say. So very happy to have PPRO and BLIK supporting us.
Wonderful. Simon, Darius, Gary, excellent insights from the session. Thank you very much. And with that, let me hand it back to Paul, please.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. Some really great insights there, and I think kind of drew together a lot of the themes that we've been discussing throughout the day. So really great to hear that. Thank you very much. If you'd like to connect with the panelists, you can find them in the platform. If you go into the speakers area, you can connect with them and drop them a message there. And also, if you're interested in finding out more in particular about what Simon and his team at PPRO are doing, you can find their virtual stand in the exhibition hall, and they've got lots of information on there about how they can work with you. And the members of the PPRO team are also there ready to take your inquiries. All that remains for me to do then is to thank our panelists. Really great session. Thank you very much. And then we're now going to move into our final session for Seamless Asia, which is focusing on winning a customer experience and keeping your customers coming back for more. So I guess in some ways also a fairly natural segue on from what we've been talking about. So thanks very much, Richard, Simon, Darius, and Gary. And hopefully we'll be able to meet in person in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
bye,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.